It's a silverware drawer. And we got sick of using one of those junky plastic inserts. This turned out to be kind of interesting. There's a lot of stuff going on in order to make something like this, so I'll go over it a little bit, and hopefully you'll find something interesting in all this. I'm still amid construction, it's not done. These are just spacers holding it all together. Okay, first let's discuss general partitioning. I have 5 regular cells for typical silverware. And then there's another one here, so I don't know what that will be used for. We have a long one here and a long one here. It's right now a mirror image of itself, which the long one causes a corresponding short one here and here. The long ones can be useful for these long knives or chopsticks. Yes, chopsticks. I learned to use them by eating lots of cups of soup, and using number 2 pencils. Hey, whatever gets you there. Although I heard a tip on good authority that if you want to learn and you don't know how to use chopsticks, practice with your left hand, because it's kind of hard to undo the learning that you've already done with pencil and pen for your right hand, assuming you're right-handed. The 2 double cells here and here are for, scissors or measuring cups, whatever weird kitchen oddities end up in your silverware drawer. This is a pretty big drawer, I should probably add, but a smaller one you might want to reduce. It would probably be reduced by the distance of 2, or the thickness of 2 cells. These cells happen to be something like 2 3/8, which was the total width of the drawer divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The stock that I'm using that's the tricky part. I'm using tulipwood, and I took it was something like a 7/8 rough cut, and recut it again in half, so now the finished product is 5/16 of an inch thick, and that's perfect. If you use a hardwood, you might want to make it thicker. This tulipwood is rather soft. Softwood, 2 words, soft wood. So it's really easy to brad now. I'm using 5/8 of an inch, 18 gauge brads, for lack of a better term. I don't know what they're called. And if you're not accustomed to using one of these, this might be a bit tight. It might be tough for you. But if you're skilled, it's not a big deal. Keep your finger out of the blast range. And you can see that it's really resistant to splitting. It's just good stuff. And if you glue these, it's going to be really tough. You will not get away with that with a hardwood. When it's all done, hopefully, I'll be able to grab it between these 2 center cells and lift the entire insert out because it's not fastened. I reduced its front to back dimension by 1/16 of an inch to allow it to just have a little bit of flex without moving. In order for me to pull this off so that it removes in one piece, there was a technical problem that I had to address. This face board for the drawer, the mounting screws that connect it on the inside had to be countersunk, as did the handle hardware. So I'll show you how you can do that first. This hardware sticks out, so you'll have to take it off. And the problem is that this isn't flat because all this stuff is sticking up and we need to countersink it. Here's what I did. Piece of scrap, hole drilled the size that I want to make my countersink. While the screw is still in place, cover the screw with the hole, clamp it down, and then remove the screw with a screwdriver. Then you know that this hole is going to be centered over your screw, and you are free to make a little countersink. You can just scratch it at first so that the mark has been outlined. Move this away, and then you can see it better to drill it to the depth that you need. And of course, you can do it with a different size drill bit to do your handle. And because this stuff is often finicky, you may need to cut down the size of the attaching bolt. I had to cut mine down with a grinder, something like 3/16 of an inch, just to accommodate the depth of this countersink. So now that the inside of the drawer is nice and smooth, the way that it should have been in the first place, we're free to make a removable insert. My stock is 2 3/8 wide, and that's a coincidence because it's about the same as one of the cells. That brings it up something like an inch short of the top. Gives us a little bit of wiggle room. To begin with, pretend this stuff isn't done. We're starting with a square frame. And I made the square frame such that the sides are the full length of the drawer. And my reasoning for doing that is to just mimic what's already here, and that gives it a woven appearance. It's not really structural, it's just me being nitpicky. After your frame is in place, you will need to cut 4 of these full length parts. But Pocket, you only made 2. I know, but do as I say, not as I do, because I'm actually from the future and I've already done this. So 4 of these so that the 2 center ones will carry all the way through, and we'll use a half lap joint that makes it nice and strong in the middle. So good thing I made some extra. How do I determine this shape? Okay, we'll get there. First of all, since I'm going to replace these with full length ones, these are now garbage. Maybe I'll come up with something else for those. But you need to determine this shape. This shape is determined by cutting the length of the drawer in half so that we get 2 cells that are mirror images. And that should leave you with something around, I think it was 9.5, which, yeah, 9.5, which is plenty for your typical silverware. So really you could have 2 sets in the same drawer. This part here will determine the fundamental basis of the shape of your overall, whatever this thing is called. So start your curve a little more than the thickness of another piece away. And the reason for that, that way you can use an additional block to protect it from damage from knives and such. We'll see more of that later. But for now, just trust me, keep your curve back at least the thickness of material and then some. And then your curve at its smallest point, I allowed about 1.25 inches of material there. But you know, you can make this to judgment. Just make a nice organic curve. And your double length part is exactly that. It's just another one of these with a little bit of additional space in the center for the partition. When I was making these originally, I didn't actually use the masking tape to cut multiple pieces at the same time. But when you're doing it on camera, you want to look like you know what you're doing, or like you've at least done this before, which I have not. But I have removed pencil marks from light colored wood before. 220 grit sandpaper. If it's heavy pencil, use an eraser first, or else you'll just smear it around. But you can almost exclusively remove it with sandpaper. Oh, another tip / trick to make me look like a professional. If you want to avoid discrepancy when you're tracing weird parts, trace one way, then flip the other. I usually do that with just about everything, even though it's not that critical in this case.